to skimp on the less than family-friendly aspects of the original series. It's not surprising to see fans clamoring for an R-rated Venom 2, especially since films like Joker and the Deadpool series were so successful. There are rumors that this rating was once on the table, but after the box office disaster Birds of Prey, Sony reconsidered its stance. Okay, as much as I'd love for Sony to really let there be carnage, the important thing here isn't necessarily an R rating. After all, between the first Venom movie and Once Upon a Deadpool, we know PG-13 movies don't have to be quite as lighthearted as they are in the MCU. Venom gave us a darker, grittier feel than many comic book movies, and that's something I want to see carry over into the second film. But considering the fact that Venom 2 director Andy Serkis made a PG-13 version of The Jungle Book, I'm pretty sure we don't have to worry about this movie being too cheerful. I'd take some extra action scenes, but as long as Venom 2 keeps what worked about the first movie, I'll be happy. As I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of craziness that takes place in the comics, even beyond the idea of alien symbiotes bonding with humans. And as much as I hate to admit it, not every single aspect of the comics would translate well to the big screen. Yes, the Thanos copter would have made the Infinity Saga even better, but let's not get into that right now. But speaking of the MCU, there's a reason why they waited so long to properly introduce magic into this fictional world. Even off-the-wall movie science that grossly misuses the word quantum provided a sense of realism to these fictional stories. Throwing magic into the mix can dilute that, and that's kind of what we saw happen when the Darkhold was introduced in the comics. It's a book written by the evil elder god Chthon, and after it was tainted by Carnage, he ended up being weak against eldritch magic instead of sonic attacks. In a world with alien symbiotes and superheroes, throwing elder gods on top of it might be a little much. This isn't a Stephen King novel after all. It's just not possible to pack all the comic details into a single film, so let's keep things simple by relying on make-believe science instead of ancient magic. I'll be the first to admit that I was skeptical going into the first Venom movie, but there's a reason the first film worked so well, and that is because the major focus was on the relationship between disgraced journalist Eddie Brock and the alien symbiote. According to producer Matt Tolmack, audiences loved seeing Eddie and the symbiote bond, and that's something they want to carry over into the second film. Because we have a new human-symbiote pairing, I can't wait to see explored on the big screen. We've seen a teaser of Woody Harrelson's Cletus Kasady, and now it's time to introduce a little carnage to the equation. Cletus and this symbiote have a connection, just like Eddie and Venom do, in that it's kind of weird and creepy, but we love it. Saying Cletus is crazy is a little bit of an understatement, since in the comics he racked up 11 life sentences. And that's before any aliens were involved. In the comics, these two get so close that Cletus could generate a copy of the symbiote from his own body. Pretty much everybody knows who Venom is at this point, but comic book fans know that the series is not short on other alien symbiotes. As tempting as it might be to fill Venom 2 with other out-of-control aliens, I'm hoping it doesn't happen. There are even other forms of Carnage, like Ultimate Carnage from Earth 1610. The Ultimate version was made with the DNA of Peter Parker, the Venom symbiote, and a little dash of lizard serum. And don't even get me started on all the other symbiotes out there, like the ones from the Life Foundation, Riot, Lasher, Phage, and Agony. Like Carnage, they can be traced back to Venom, but packing them all into this movie would be too much too soon. We all know the relationship between Sony, Disney, and Spider-Man is a little bit complicated at this point. There have been rumors that Sony wants to connect their fictional movie universe with the well-established Marvel Cinematic Universe and would theoretically share custody of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Fans are pretty much pounding their fists on desks and doing their best J. Jonah Jameson impressions, demanding we get to see Spider-Man face off against Carnage in Venom 2. Artists Camille Viale and Mohamed Hiban even created this awesome piece of fan art showing Miles Morales in a symbiote suit. Obviously, I want to see Spider-Man teaming up with Venom to bring down Carnage. Who wouldn't want to see something like that play out on the big screen? But at this point, the idea of finally knowing about the supposed connection between the MCU and Sony's universe might be almost as exciting. Okay, hear me out. Yes, I want to see Spider-Man and Carnage together on the big screen, so the combination of Spider-Man and Carnage that is Spider-Carnage seems like it should be a logical step. This character is undeniably awesome, but his origin makes him too complicated to cram into Venom 2. See, this isn't the Carnage symbiote fused with Peter Parker. It's fused with Ben Reilly, who is a clone of Peter Parker. In Web of Carnage, the symbiote ditches Cletus and ends up dealing with Ben, who is less than thrilled about the situation, to put it mildly. But to see this work on the big screen, we'd first have to introduce the idea that clones are a thing that could be lurking around Sony's fictional universe, and that there's one of Spider-Man in particular, and that Spider-Man's even there right now. It would require a hefty amount of backstory in a film that's already introducing major characters, so as much as I hate to say it, I think Spider-Carnage should be left out of Venom 2. I've admitted to being skeptical that you could have Venom without Spider-Man, but the first movie simply worked around Peter Parker's involvement in his origin story. He went straight to bonding with Eddie Brock and has similar powers to Spider-Man simply because he's an alien with all kinds of crazy powers. Honestly, I didn't really have to suspend my disbelief all that hard in this scenario, but despite the fact that it worked, and let's be honest, it could have been a lot worse, a lot of fans, including myself, were disappointed that it didn't play out the way it did in the comic books. Which is why it's so important that Venom 2 doesn't mess with the origin story of Carnage. The Carnage symbiote has a close bond with Cletus Kasady, but the two of them also have connections to Eddie Brock and Venom. Cletus and Eddie were cellmates in the comics, although it looks like they'll have more of a Clarice Starling / Hannibal Lecter relationship in this movie. Still, the important thing is that Eddie and Cletus really don't like each other, and that Carnage isn't just another alien symbiote, but one that came directly from Venom. This relationship between the four characters is one which should definitely be explored in Let There Be Carnage. Cletus isn't the only character who's fused with Carnage over the years. At one point, he made the acquaintance of none other than notorious Spider-Man foe Norman Osborn. That's right, you've probably heard of the Green Goblin, but how about the Red Goblin? This symbiote and Norman had a power struggle at first, but eventually realized they had a whole lot in common, namely the desire to cause a lot of pain and destruction without regard for human life. Obviously, I want to see Norman Osborn back on the big screen, and the idea of him fusing with an alien symbiote is even more amazing. But I desperately want to avoid another Spider-Man 3 scenario where all the villains in Spider-Man's rogues gallery show up to party and there simply isn't enough runtime to accommodate them all. Just because I'm worried about overloading on characters doesn't mean I don't want Carnage / Cletus to have any allies in the movie. There are rumors that actress Naomi Harris is in talks to play the role of Francis Borison, better known as Shrek. Oh, it's not Shrek? Oh, okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Better known as Shriek. Like most villains, she has a sad backstory which led to a life of crime, and after being freed by Carnage, she accompanied him on his crime spree along with some other evildoers. Shriek is so crazy that at one point an alien symbiote decided to find another host in order to get away from her. The first Venom movie managed to include Anne Weying and establish her as an interesting character without taking away from the combination of Eddie and Venom, so I'd like to see something similar where Shriek gets a solid introduction to the big screen. Look, I'm not going to say that romance doesn't have a place in comic book movies, because when done well, it can add a very worthy element to a heartwarming story. But what I will say is that a ham-handed romance can take away from an otherwise awesome film. Just think about how unnecessary the Harley Quinn / Joker subplot was to Suicide Squad, or the less than compelling romance between Thor and Jane Foster in the MCU. Although, if Mighty Thor is half as great as it looks, I might just end up walking back that last statement. Anyway, my point is that I want to see action, alien symbiotes, and Carnage wrecking house. Hopefully Venom 2 doesn't try to humanize Cletus by showing him fall in love with Shriek or waste time on establishing a romance between them. Not only would this probably not be entertaining, but in the comics, Cletus isn't really that attached to her. In fact, he planned to dispose of her once he got bored of her and only kept her around as long as she was useful. Cletus's true love is the Carnage symbiote, as weird as that sounds, and Venom 2 should not pretend otherwise.